The story begins in the small, peaceful village of Willowby, where whispers of a peculiar incident ripple through the quiet streets. Mrs. Ellen Harrow, a well-respected spinster known for her sharp wit, is startled when her young housemaid, Clara, hesitantly knocks on her study door late one evening. "If you please, ma'am, may I have a word?" Clara asks, wringing her hands nervously. Mrs. Harrow, sensing the girl's unease, gestures for her to come in. "Of course, Clara. Speak your mind." Clara steps forward, clutching a small bundle of letters. "It's about my cousin Samuel. He's lost his position at Blackthorn Manor under suspicious circumstances." Mrs. Harrow's brow arches in intrigue. "Suspicious, you say? What exactly happened?" Clara sighs, her voice trembling. "They claim he stole Lady Blackthorn's emerald brooch. But Samuel would never. He's not that kind of man, ma'am. And now they've replaced him with someone else, strange." Mrs. Harrow listens intently, her curiosity piqued. Samuel, she recalls, had always been diligent and loyal during his brief visits to the village. "Strange, you say? How so?" Clara whispers. "The new valet, he doesn't seem right. Tall, shadowy, always lurking. And since his arrival, the manor hasn't been the same. Lights flicker at odd hours, strange noises echo through the halls. And just last week, another jewel went missing." Mrs. Harrow leans back in her chair, her mind racing. A mystery? In Willowby? The thought electrifies her. "I'll pay a visit to Blackthorn Manor tomorrow," she declares. The next afternoon, Mrs. Harrow approaches the grand ivy-covered estate. Blackthorn Manor, with its towering turrets and labyrinthine corridors, has always been a place of quiet grandeur. But today, an air of unease hangs heavy over the grounds. She is greeted at the door by Mr. Carruthers, the butler, whose usual stoic demeanor is replaced by visible discomfort. "Ah, Mrs. Harrow. Lady Blackthorn is resting. Shall I inform her of your visit?" Mrs. Harrow shakes her head. "No need. I'm here on another matter, Samuel. I heard he was let go under unfortunate circumstances." Carruthers stiffens. I am not at liberty to discuss staff matters, madam." Determined, Mrs. Harrow presses on. "And this new valet of yours, Mr. Thorncroft, is it? What do you make of him?" The butler glances nervously toward the drawing room. "I shouldn't say, ma'am, but he's different, keeps to himself. A bit too interested in the lady's valuables, if you ask me." Intrigued, Mrs. Harrow decides to observe Thorncroft herself. Under the guise of inquiring after Lady Blackthorn's health, she's invited into the manor. Thorncroft, tall and impeccably dressed in a dark suit, enters to serve tea. His movements are fluid, almost unnervingly so, and his piercing gaze sends shivers down her spine. As she sips her tea, Mrs. Harrow notices a subtle yet deliberate motion. Thorncroft's gloved hand lingers near the cabinet where Lady Blackthorn's jewels are displayed. She files the observation away. Over the next week, Mrs. Harrow gathers whispers from the village. Stories of flickering lights, unexplainable sounds, and missing trinkets grow more frequent. The final straw comes when young Alice, the scullery maid, is found sobbing in the village square. "He was in my dreams," Alice stammers. "Mr. Thorncroft, his eyes they glowed in the dark, and he whispered my name." Determined to uncover the truth, Mrs. Harrow devises a plan. She enlists the help of her friend, Inspector Hawthorne. Together, they return to Blackthorn Manor under the pretense of a friendly visit. As night falls, they hide in the shadows of the Great Hall, watching Thorncroft's every move. At midnight, he slips into Lady Blackthorn's study, unaware of their presence. Thorncroft pulls out a small, intricate device, a lockpick, and begins to tamper with the cabinet. Mrs. Harrow and Hawthorne exchange a glance before stepping forward. "Stop right there," Hawthorne commands, his voice firm. Thorncroft freezes, his eyes narrowing. Then, with alarming speed, he bolts for the window. Hawthorne gives chase, but Thorncroft is unnaturally fast, vanishing into the woods like a shadow. The following morning, the manor is abuzz with revelations. Inside Thorncroft's quarters, they find a trove of stolen jewels. Along with a false identity, the real Thorncroft had never arrived at Blackthorn Manor. It is Mrs. Harrow who pieces together the final clue. Thorncroft was no ordinary thief. He was part of a larger ring, using his disguise to infiltrate estates. Samuel, innocent all along, had been framed to pave the way for Thorncroft's arrival. Lady Blackthorn, deeply embarrassed by the scandal, publicly apologizes to Samuel and offers him his position back. The village, meanwhile, buzzes with admiration for Mrs. Harrow's cunning. As Clara helps Samuel settle back into his role, Mrs. Harrow sits by her parlor window, sipping tea and smiling faintly. Willowby may be a small village, but mysteries, oh, they have a way of finding her.